1, 2, 3, 4.
Good morning. Hi, everyone. This is Jewish Talk coming to you live from Nassau Community College on 90.3 WHPC. Also streaming on the iHeart and iTunes apps. We can be seen in the studios on my Facebook Live page and Facebook at WHPC. This program is later archived on Spreaker.com. So hi there, my name is Rabbi Pearl, in case you don't know. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This all depends on when you are listening or watching. And if you post your name and your comments, we'll be happy from time to time to say hello to you, as we do right now to Jonathan Wolf, all the way from New Jersey. Did I say it right? New Jersey. Well, my friends, I wanted to share with you that in a couple of weeks, on December 22nd, we're going to be broadcasting our famous Hanukkah telethon. And the theme this year, amongst many, is Don't Put Me in a Box. See, more and more, we are forcing people into boxes, even as they are alive. Everything from politics to religion is portrayed as simplified and binary. Whether gun control, healthcare, the economy, the extremists really have lined up, and they want us to believe that we must view these issues and almost any others as this or that. You're either with me or against me. You either totally get it or you are totally insane. The camps have been set up, and the default in our world is that you must fit neatly into one of them. But what about the camp of those who don't fit neatly or conform nicely to the binary options? What about those who see merit in conflicting views, who live with the tension that creates, who approaches complicated issues with a nuance, and who acknowledges complexity? So that's my question. Is there room for us? Do we get a voice? Or is our approach legitimate too? So while the rest of the world may be dividing up all of us into teams, Republicans versus Democrats, conservatives versus liberals, traditionalists versus progressives, right, left, who knows what, forced to toe the party line, pressured to hold predictable views based on their membership, I wish to tell you, dear friends, that in the Jewish community, we are brought up with a tradition of nuance and diversity. And I want to share with you a Talmud, a page from the Talmud, a teaching from the Talmud. It says the following, in the name of Rav Chisda, this great rabbi. He teaches the following: one who learns how to think only from one Rebbe, from one teacher, doesn't ever see blessing. That's on page 19a in the tractate Avodah Zarah. Again, let me just repeat that. One who learns how to think from only one teacher doesn't ever see blessings. Just as with material investments, we get a better return when we diversify, so too our spiritual investments, learning and exposure, should be diversified with openness and access to the 70 faces of authentic Torah. The Medrash actually tells us that Moses wrote 13 Torahs, one corresponding with each of the 12 tribes, and the 13th was to put into the ark so that if someone wants to distort any of the 12 Torahs, it will be checked against the 13th for authenticity. So the Holy Temple as well had 13 gates, one corresponding with each tribe, and the 13th for those who didn't know what tribe they descended from. Once there was a 13th gate and a 13th Torah, why the need for the original 12? So perhaps, my friends, the message is that each tribe, each camp, each point of view deserves to exist and to be heard in isolation. But the diverse points of view also have to recognize and allow for the 13th gate, for those who can't easily fit into one of the existing tribes, who aren't naturally descendants of a particular point of view, but who choose to walk through the entrance that allows for nuances, a multiplicity of views, and a complex approach. So people are entitled to not fit into a box, to not line up neatly or conform to the preconceived paradigms of others. But more than that, one needs to be careful not to be overly certain of their point of view. Let me tell you something. When asked what he would eliminate in the world if he had a magic wand, and the question was proposed to Nobel Prize winner Dr. Daniel Kahneman, he answered with one word. Do you know what I would like to eliminate? And he said one word: overconfidence. There is a difference between having convictions, advocating for a point of view or towards specific policies, and being overly confident that they are the only way of seeing or doing things. So I say to you, dear friends, be strong in what you believe in. Pursue it. Represent it. Be pervasive and persuasive in your arguments for it. And in the end, let others see it differently nonetheless. If we want to see blessing in our thinking, in our judgment, in our relationships, and in our lives, we need to have more than one teacher. We need to be exposed to more than one perspective. The community of those who walk through the 13th gate need to speak up and speak out. We need to not be dragged to overconfident, superficial, and binary positions and conclusions just because it makes it more comfortable or convenient for others to have us there with them. Those who maintain a steadfast commitment to nuance and complexity, who can still see the merit in conflicting views, must not be silenced by those screaming over them both online and offline. So, my friends, one day, after 120 years, all people are placed into a box. Let's enrich our lives by not putting ourselves or others into one until then. Let me see who's watching us today. Hello to Jonathan and to Renee. Good morning. And to Perry Blatt. Good morning to you and to everybody joining us today on the Facebook and listening to us. And, of course, all those who are, just enjoying it. I want to tell you a little bit very special about yesterday and today on our calendar and what we can learn from it. Yesterday on the Jewish calendar was the 9th day of Kislev. Today's the 10th. Yesterday marked the birthday and the day of passing of Rabbi Dov Ber of Lubavitch. He is known as the Mittler Rebbe. He was the son and successor to the founder of Chabad, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi. Now, his contribution to Jewish life and learning was known for his unique style of what we call broadening the rivers. His teachings were the intellectual rivers, the expansion, lending breadth and depth to the principles set down by his teacher. He was born in Lyozna, White Russia, in 1773. He was named after his father's mentor and teacher, Rabbi Dov Ber of Mizrich, who had passed away on the 19th day of the previous year. And he assumed the leadership of Chabad in the year 1812. In 1813, he settled in the town of Lubavitch. That's how the name Chabad Lubavitch is associated with us, which was to serve as the movement's headquarters for the next 102 years. In 1826, he was arrested on charges that his teachings threatened the imperial authority of the Tsar, but he was subsequently exonerated. What really happened in those days, if you know the history, to this very day, on my trip to Israel, we went to Hebron, and in Hebron is a special shul, because all the way back in that earlier part of the 1800s, the first group of Jewish people, Hasidim who came from Russia to settle in the land of Israel, settled in Hebron, and they built a shul. And to this very day, there's a beautiful shul that is dedicated to the Mittler Rebbe. And because he asked fellow Jewish communities in Russia to help support this community, there were those who used this opportunity to come up with a story that he was sending money to the Ottoman Empire. And the Ottoman Empire at that time were having a fight with Russia. So it would look like he was supporting the enemy. Of course, ultimately he was exonerated. And today, which is the 10th day, is the day of the marking of his liberation. He passed away on his 54th birthday in 1827, a day before the first anniversary of his liberation. As I said, he was arrested on charges, but it was subsequently exonerated and proved that all he was doing was helping his fellow mankind back in the land of Israel at that time. So today The date of his release, the 10th day of Kislev, is celebrated amongst the Chabad Hasidim as a day of liberation. We didn't say Tachnu today. We have special Farbrengens, and we discuss some of the Rebbe's teachings, which I'd like to share with you today. When he was liberated on this day, on the 10th day of Kislev, he was actually saying the Psalms, and he happened to be on the Psalm, in Psalm 55, that in Hebrew reads, Pada b'shalom nafshi. He has saved my soul in peace. Now, ever since that time, the event has been celebrated, and this song is sung. And I'm going to try to sing it very briefly. It's just the beginning of it, and hopefully it'll come across. But this was the Hebrew words that the Rebbe, that's the Mittler Rebbe, and it turns out also the same words that his father, when he was released from prison, he too was, by divine providence, saying the very same words in Psalms, Pada b'shalom nafshi, he has saved my soul in peace. So here goes, I'll try my best. Pada b'shalom nafshi mikrov li ki berabim imadi. That's the beginning of the song. The last line is Vani eftach bach, 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 eftach bach. So, I want to share one of the stories that is often discussed on this day. It was actually recorded also in a letter that the Rebbe in 1962 wrote to a group of supporters. And it speaks loudly and of the depth of caring for another human being. The Alter Rebbe, that is the first Chabad Rebbe, he shared his house with his oldest son, his oldest married son, Dov Ber, who is known as the Mittler Rebbe, whose yahrzeit and birthday was yesterday, whose day of liberation is today. So they lived in the same house. And Rav Dov Ber, the Mittler Rebbe, was known for his unusual power of concentration. Once, when the Mittler Rebbe, Rav Dov Ber, was engrossed in learning, his baby, sleeping in a cradle nearby, fell out and began to cry. The infant's father did not hear the baby's cries, but the infant's grandfather, the Alter Rebbe, who was also engrossed in his studies in his room on the upper floor, he most certainly did. So the grandfather interrupted his studies, went downstairs, picked up the baby, soothed it, and replaced it in its cradle. Through all of this, the father, who was right in the same room, he remained quite oblivious to what was going on around him. A little later, subsequently, the Alter Rebbe admonished his son, and he said like this: no matter how engrossed one may be in the loftiest of occupations, of learning and in-depth meditation, one must never remain insensitive to the cry of a child. This is a story that has been transmitted to us from generation to generation. The Rebbe himself said he heard it from his own father-in-law, the previous Rebbe. And it conveys a lasting message to all of us, dear friends, especially in our times. And it actually characterizes one of the basic tenets of Chabad Lubavitch movement, to listen, to hearken to the cry of anyone in distress. A child can be an infant in years. It can be a child of school age. It could be a child who has fallen from the cradle of Jewish education and opportunity. Or it may even be someone who chronologically is already an adult, but he's an infant as far as his Jewish life is concerned. He's an infant in knowledge and experience of the Jewish religion, its heritage, and the way of life. And they cry out to us in anguish, because whether it's a child in years, or whether it's a child in knowledge, they live in a spiritual void, whether they are conscious of this or feel it only subconsciously. And we have to know, you and me, my friends, no matter how preoccupied we may be in any lofty causes, we must be very sensitive to the cries and the yearnings of these children, and to help them, offer them opportunities to bring them back into the cradle of learning, of life, of heritage, because that has a priority over everything. My friends, this is such an important lesson that all of us must be involved in. And that is why, allow me to digress for a moment. Please, I urge all of my listeners and all of our viewers to join us on the evening of December the 22nd for the Hanukkah Telethon, where you too can help us make sure that the cries of those who are yearning to connect, to be protected, to be included, can be supported. And after the program, feel free to visit us at HanukkahTelethon.com for all the information. Here's another story. Let me say hello to everybody who's watching us, to Martin Jackson. Good morning. To Martin Jackson, thank you so much. And to Bernard, thank you so much for joining us today. Here's another important story that I want to share with you about the Mittler Rebbe, whose day of liberation we celebrate today, and whose birthday and day of passing was yesterday. A sign of a very, very holy and complete life when a person passes away on their birthday, just like Moses did. This goes back when the Mittler Rebbe was a young man of 16. And his father entrusted him with the task of being a spiritual guide to the young men in the Chabad community. Can you imagine? He was all of 16, and he already was serving as a spiritual guide. And he strongly encouraged his disciples to gather together for informal Farbrengens, to inspire, to consult with matters. And he often would say that, because his purpose was to add in the refinement of one's character, he says, when two people get together and one tells the other what ails in his heart, the result is that two godly souls taking on a single animal soul. What am I talking about? This is brought up, elaborated in Tanya. Each of us have two distinct souls that animate the body, an animal soul and a godly soul. The animal soul is driven by the self-centered aspirations of physical life. The godly soul, the other part of us, is driven by the selfless quest to serve Hashem, the Almighty. But the animal soul, which is utterly self-oriented, has really no interest in the triumph of her fellow animal soul. But not so the godly soul, whose only desire is to do the will of her Creator. So when a person grapples along with his spiritual ills, what we have is a one-on-one struggle of two selves. But when two people get together, this is the power of getting together for bringing and sharing words of Torah. When two people get together, the animal soul of each is overwhelmed by the double onslaught of the divine essence of the person. Very powerful. That's why people don't ever feel alone. If you know someone's alone, talk to them, speak to them. In so many different ways, you're able to help them and uplift them. Again, the Mittler Rebbe was known for his joyfulness. He even had a group of Hasidim who formed a capella. He had a cappella group who would sing. He also had another group who were trained to perform tricks on horseback. Can you imagine? On special occasions, joyous occasions, he would ask these groups to perform, and he would stand on the balcony watching. The Rebbe's son, Reb Nachum, happened to be one of those horsemen. Once, for no apparent reason, the Rebbe suddenly instructed both of these groups to perform at the same time. So he had these group of Hasidim singing in the a cappella, and he also had the horses. So the Hasidim performed while the Rebbe stood in his usual spot, and he watched the horsemen carefully. Suddenly, one of the horsemen was the Rebbe's own son. He fell from his horse. Informed that his son was in grave danger, the the Rebbe merely motioned with his hand to continue the festivities. After a while, the Rebbe asked them to stop, and he stepped into his private office. A doctor was summoned, and Reb Nochem, that means the Rebbe's own son, his situation proved far less severe than previously thought. The Rebbe was asked why he had told his horsemen and choir to continue with their performance while his beloved son lay injured on the ground. And he responded, "Why don't you ask me an even better question? Why did I ask the horsemen and the choir to perform on a simple weekday in the first place? What was all this festivity all about?" And the Rebbe explained, "Today was meant to be a harsh day for my son. I saw a grave accusation against him in the heavenly courts. The prosecution was very powerful, and I could see only one way out: joy. Because joy sweetens the attributes of severity. With joy you can overcome all kinds of negativity and restraint. So therefore I called upon the choir to sing, and I asked the riders to gladden everybody with their antics. The joy thus created and tempered the strict decree against my son. But a small portion of the decree remained. That is why he fell off his horse and hurt his legs. However, the continued revelry and the excitement lessened even this residual decree. And God willing, Nochem, his son, will recover in the very near future." Something to think about. When something goes wrong, my friends, I'm just reminding myself, under a chuppah, what's the last thing the chassan, the groom, does? He breaks, right? He puts his foot down on the glass and he breaks it. And what happens? Suddenly, Mazel Tov. Everybody starts to sing. The cup lies broken on the floor. Why do we do this act of destruction at such a high point of a couple's, initiation into marriage? And the answer is that if in the future anything negative, anything gets broken in the course of their marriage, it should be sweetened with the Mazel Tov and transformed into something positive. I also want to share with you, let me see. I want to say hello to Reverend Jackson, who's really joining our message. Thank you so much today. Thank you so much. And I also want to tell you that we are having, the last week of December also coincides with the 8 days of Hanukkah. So I want to tell you what we're doing on December 25th, the third day of Hanukkah. And we're having what we call a comedy with a cause. This cause is to support programs to foster inclusion of people with disabilities and mental wellness. You often, during this holiday season, so many drives are held, so many fundraising events are held. And we at Chabad of Mineola have taken upon ourselves not to forget those who are often overlooked. They are the good people facing with disabilities and mental health challenges. So I'm announcing now a wonderful comedy show, Comedy for a Cause, and it takes place on Wednesday, December 25th, 2019, the third day of Hanukkah. Doors open at 1:30, and showtime will begin with the comedian Ashley Blaker. All this takes place at the Chabad Mineola in Chabad Mineola at 261 Willis Avenue. Now, who is Ashley Blaker? He's an internationally acclaimed comedian, seen and heard on TV and radio across the world. He has performed on 5 continents, including UK, USA, Canada, South Africa, Israel, Australia. He actually had a 5-week run on Off-Broadway, and it was called by the New York Times a slickly funny stand-up show. And my friends, he also had a sold-out tour in May of 2019. He began a sold-out tour of his new show called Profit Sharing alongside a Muslim comedian, Imran Yusuf. So, my friends, he's actually the first Orthodox Jewish comedian to be given his own BBC show. And the show was called Ashley Blaker's Goyish Guide to Judaism. I'm telling you, it's fantastic. So you're welcome to go to Hanukkah to Chabad Mineola /comedy, Comedy Ticks, and you get all the information. Again, chabadmineola.com /comedy ticks, and learn all about this, or go to our face page as well. My friends, time is moving on, as we say. And, oh, by the way, this wonderful comedian, if he has any free time, then it's spent being run ragged by his 6 children and 2 cats. And I know Kim would love that. He's got 2 cats and 6 children. By the way, Hanukkah is coming, right? You all know about Hanukkah. So we often think of Hanukkah, we take as a given that the reason we light the Hanukkah candles is to see the flames. We tend to assume that the Sumanissa, that's the publicizing of the miracle. And that is achieved by lighting oil and commemorating a miracle from many years ago. But I'm suggesting that we're missing the point. There's much more depth to why we light those candles. The real purpose is not to see the flame itself, but to allow the flame to illuminate the darkness and to reveal what is all around us. So perhaps publicizing the miracle is not accomplished simply through the candle, but rather when we take a moment to consider the trials and tribulations we have been through, and yet allow the light to illuminate for us how fortunate and blessed we are nonetheless. Look what's going on. Look around the world, and yet we see so many miracles. Each one of us has struggled, whether it's an illness, a financial hardship, yet we're here. We are positive. We're upbeat. We're grateful. That's a miracle. The mitzvah is described as Ner Ishu Beisai, which means a light, man and his home. Homiletically speaking, it simply means that when a person lights his candles, he should do it in front of his family. Do it at home. More homiletically speaking, that when you light Ner Ish Ubeisai, the mitzvah is to see the candle, but more importantly to see Ish, to see ourselves, and how Ubeisai, and see how we are here, and see Beisai, which means one's home. Look around the home and say, thank you, Hashem. How fortunate each of us are that we have a family, have a spouse, we have children, we have a home. We have simple things, and not to get carried away with all the other things that we get, who knows what. That's what Hanukkah is all about. To actually, as many lights and beautiful, all kinds of bulbs that we have today in our homes and all kinds of fancy lighting, once a year we step back and light candles because it adds a different dimension of light. Yeah, of course, you flip on the switch, and you, if you have a smart house, smart home, you can flip it on, before you come home even. But there's nothing compared to the light, whether it's the Hanukkah candles or the Shabbos candles. When those Shabbos candles are lit on your Shabbos table, you see things differently. There's a holiness that envelops the home. We look around the Shabbos table, we thank Hashem. And then comes the lights of the Hanukkah candle to remind us that the 8 candles represent the miracles of life. This is your host, Rabbi Pearl. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you again. Have a wonderful week.